I am DK Wall, an author living in Asheville, North Carolina. I write novels and short stories about big lives in small towns, ordinary people who face extraordinary challenges. Each week, I share a tale that is 100% true, except for the parts I make up. This is the Musing for Monday, July 24th. Fake it till you make it. A quick note before we get to this week's musing. Last week, I tried something different and posted this as a video. The experiment was a resounding success. Nearly 3,000 people, many of whom had never heard of my work, saw at least part of it. Based on your comments and emails, most of you enjoyed the format. Some, though, said you preferred to read the musing either every week or at least sometimes. Here's the good news. I have a solution that will make everyone happy, with a bonus. First, I will share the musing as a video on YouTube and on Facebook each week. You can subscribe and follow on those channels if that's your preference. I highly recommend YouTube to ensure you see it. But if you prefer the written word, hang on. Since I have to write the story in order to film the video, I'll post the musing on my website for your reading pleasure. And you don't even have to go to the website. To get it sent directly to your inbox, subscribe to the weekly newsletter, and I'll email it to you every Monday. The subscription box is at the bottom of each musing. And now for the bonus. Several of you commented I should share the musing as a podcast. You'll be happy to know it's done. You can now listen directly on my website, download it for later listening, or subscribe to your favorite podcast channel, such as Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or so many more. So there you go. You can now read, listen, or watch the musing, your choice, and all totally free. Let me know what you think, and please share the musing with others. Now with that out of the way, let's get to this week's musing. Fake it till you make it. In the summer of 1981, at the ripe old age of 17, I landed my dream summer job, camp counselor for the Boy Scouts of America, the great outdoors, hiking, camping, swimming. Amazingly, they were even going to pay me $50 whole dollars a week. Minimum wage in 1981 was $3.35 an hour. If, like many of my friends, I had flipped burgers for 40 hours a week that summer, I would have made almost 3 times as much money and still worked less hours. But, the camp director pointed out, the job came with free room and board. Of course, I was 17. I was still living at home, so I already had free room and board. But the great outdoors, hiking, camping, swimming. I wasn't going to be doing any of those things. I was to be in charge of the handicraft lodge. In charge sounds mightier than it was. The handicraft lodge had a staff of 1, me. I was responsible for opening, managing supplies, cleaning, securing the building at night, and, most importantly, controlling the chaos of a horde of mostly 11 and 12-year-old boys while teaching them about wood carving, basketry, metalwork, and leatherwork. For those of you who know me, please stop laughing. Let's let others catch up. You see, I wasn't exactly an expert in those fields. And by not exactly an expert, I mean I knew absolutely nothing about them. Zip, zero, nada. I didn't even have the merit badges. Not that I hid that from the camp leaders during the interview process. When they offered me the job, I told them I was unqualified. A scout is, after all, trustworthy. Not a problem, they said, because I had a week to learn. 1 entire week. The week before camp started. They recruited a scoutmaster highly skilled in those crafts, not to teach the kids, to teach me. He took off work to coach me through the orientation week. On that first Sunday, the staff arrived at the camp to get to know each other. After moving my supplies into the tent that was to be my summer home, I made my way to the handicraft lodge. The volunteer scoutmaster patiently waited for me at a workbench in the center of the room. He invited me to sit down. He wanted to assess my skills in order to map out a plan to have me prepared for the arrival of kids a week from that day. He folded his hands, leaned forward, and asked, "Which of these 4 areas do you know the most about?" Confidently, I answered, "Wood carving." "Excellent. What do you know about wood carving?" "It involves wood." I paused, but realized he was waiting for more, so I added, "and knives." A solid 15 seconds passed while he stared at me, wondering exactly how much of a smart aleck I was, though I don't recall him saying aleck, but let's pretend he did. "What about basketry? What do you know about basketry?" "It involves baskets, but not knives. At least I don't think so." "Metalwork?" "Metal. Not sure about the knives." "And leatherwork?" "Definitely leather. Probably knives." He stood and scanned the room as if he was hoping that he was the victim of an elaborate practical joke. After an uncomfortable minute of silence, he pointed to a stack of boxes and suggested I unpack supplies. He needed to go have a chat with the camp director. I don't know what was said during that conversation, though I spent the time wondering what the record was for the shortest employment in the history of the summer camp. To keep my mind off my impending doom, I dutifully unpacked supplies. Fortunately, each box was labeled: wood carving, basketry, metalwork, leatherwork. Likewise, the cabinets along the walls were also labeled: woodworking, basketry, metalwork, leatherwork. I figured I couldn't mess this up. As I unpacked the various tools, though, I realized an unsettling pattern. Almost none of the tools looked particularly familiar. Even when I knew what they were, I didn't have a clue how they would be utilized in their respective craft. Take wood carving, that craft I claimed to be best at. I understood that the intricate collection of carving knives and chisels could be used to cut away and shape wood. I just didn't understand how or anything else beyond that point. My experience basically began and ended with the pocket knife I carried. What I knew was whittling and not so much wood carving. After a bit of time, the scoutmaster returned. He hadn't climbed into his car and driven away, laughing hysterically. I wouldn't have blamed him if he had. Instead, he returned with a 4-day plan. On Monday, we would dedicate the day to wood carving. Tuesday, basketry. Wednesday and Thursday, metalwork and leatherwork, respectively. Come Friday morning, I would be tested. The results would determine a remediation plan for the remaining time. By Sunday morning, he vowed, I would be ready. He said those words with great confidence, his voice steady. His eyes, however, reflected grave doubt. On Monday morning, the staff gathered for a hearty breakfast. The camp director gave an inspiring speech. The counselors broke into their respective groups. The waterfront crew, affectionately called water rats by the rest of the staff, headed to the lake for a day of swimming, diving, canoeing, and rowing. The field sports team bonded with rifles, shotguns, black powder muskets, and bows and arrows. The business team set up the camp store and the snack bar. The nature staff hiked through the woods. And I went to the handicraft lodge. On that first day of wood carving lessons, I learned many things, primarily first aid. All those blades were really sharp. I became intimately familiar with the medical supplies in the cabinets. Tuesday went through with fewer injuries. Basketry isn't quite as dangerous, though not without hazard. After I had woven my first seat bottom, the Scoutmaster suggested I sit in it as a test. That went just about as well as you might expect. During the metalwork lesson on Wednesday, I continued my practice and developed more first aid skills from my encounters with sharp edges. I also expressed surprise how noisy stamping metal could be inside the confines of that handicraft lodge. The Scoutmaster chuckled and grinned. He suggested I was really going to enjoy a couple of dozen 11-year-olds eagerly stamping metal at the same time. Leatherwork on Thursday, at least, was quieter. Come Friday morning, I was convinced I was going to fail miserably. But as he tested me, he repeatedly complimented me for what I had learned. That would have been confidence building if he hadn't also created a list, an unsettlingly long list of things to review over the next 2 days. Those 2 days passed, though, and as the sun set that Saturday evening, he declared me ready. Again, he said those words with conviction. And again, his eyes held doubts. On Sunday, buses rolled into the parking lot. Boys carried their gear to tents. Staff performed skits at the opening night campfire. Monday morning dawned. I waited in that handicraft lodge, feeling completely in charge. Not really. I tried to sound confident, but my stomach roiled in nerves. And then, just as I debated whether I could escape with a mad dash away from camp, I heard the approaching roar. A mob of 11 and 12-year-old boys descended on my lodge. They wanted to learn wood carving, basketry, metalwork, and leatherwork. I blinked, I swallowed, and then a miracle happened. 2 Scoutmasters entered the building and asked if I would mind if they hung out for the week and helped. I wasn't fooled. It didn't take more than a few questions to figure out that they were friends of the man who had coached me the week before. But I wasn't insulted. What I felt was a warming sense of gratitude. And with their support, I looked at those boys and began to share with them what I had learned the week before. I had a blast that summer, so much so that I worked at that camp for 5 more years. Though, to be clear, never again in the handicraft lodge. Several years later, a few weeks shy of college graduation, I sat with some friends in the cafeteria on campus. A tour guide entered, showing a prospective student around the cafeteria. As they passed our table, the high schooler froze and stared at me. "Oh man," he exclaimed, "you taught me handicrafts at Camp Natami." My friends thought that was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Somehow, my experiences of teaching kids how to craft had never been a topic of conversation. But I took away that I had made an impression on a young Boy Scout, so much of an impression that he remembered me all those years later. What type of impression might be debatable, but he still had all his fingers. I counted. A long-standing tradition of the Monday Musing is the gratuitous dog photo, a picture of one of our dogs for no reason other than the fun of it. In this photo, Frankie Suave enjoyed a Saturday summer evening in the yard and made sure his younger siblings knew better than to disturb his serenity. I hope you enjoyed this week's Monday Musing. Let me know what you thought of it. drop a comment, or send a message. I love the dialogue. A quick reminder before I go. This month's survey, How Hot is Too Hot, closes out at the end of the week. Please visit dkwall.com/survey to participate. The results will be shared in early August. Feel free to buy one of my novels while you're on the website. Again, dkwall.com. That's DKWALL.com. And don't forget to subscribe either to the newsletter or YouTube or your favorite podcast so we can stay in touch. And remember, if you're challenged by something new, fake it till you make it. Have a terrific week. See you next Monday.